hands if you know who he is.
Michael Phelps.
Okay, this is Novak Djokovic. Novak is a 4-time Wimbledon champion, just won this last year. And what's fascinating about Novak was Victor Troicki in 2004. And what I mean by that is he literally had the exact same stats. He was Victor Troicki. If you go back to 2004, he won 49% of his points. And coincidentally, he actually won 49% of his games. And he was ranked right around 100, 115 at that point in time. And back in 2004, he also earned $300,000 a year. He literally had the same exact stats as Victor Troicki. What's different about Novak, though, Novak was looking for something different. He wasn't settled at being 100, 115. He just wanted to find a little edge. He wanted to see if he could drive up his numbers just by a little bit, just a little margin. And he focused on his points won percentage. And what he did between the years of 2006 and 2010 is he drove it up and managed to work on his fundamentals in his game, drove it up to 52%. What was amazing, you wouldn't think that that would make that much of a difference, but it sure did. It took his games won to over 79%, and it elevated him from 100 all the way up to number 3 in the world. What do you think the third-ranked tennis player in the world makes? A lot. Makes about $5 million a year, not counting endorsements. That's pretty interesting. But here was the great thing. Novak didn't stop there. He said, you know what, if I did that once and I made a 3% difference, I think I could actually do that again. He worked more on his fundamentals, and he said, listen, I just literally want to see if I can drive this up another 3 percentage points. And he actually achieved that between 2011 and 2017, winning 55% of his points on average. What that did to his games won is drove it to 90%. Number 1 in the world, and making the small sum of $14 million per year, not counting endorsements. That's pretty impressive. Here's the fascinating part. For those of you who play tennis, raise your hand if you play tennis. You may have already done the math on this. 3% difference in the points won only amounts to about 1 extra point every 4 games. Legitimately, think about that. 1 extra point difference over the course of 4 games. And that drove him from number 100 to number 3, and number 3 to number 1. Amazing. What smart people realize, and the top people realize, is that 3% edge is everything in sports. It is everything in leadership. And it's also everything in life. But why do some people find that edge, and why do some people not? Why doesn't everybody find the edge? It's 3%, it's not that big of a deal. But there are actually reasons that prevent people from finding that extra 3% difference. And I want to share with you the 4 most common reasons that prevent people from finding that extra edge. Okay, problem number 1, they spend too much time with the wrong people. So we all know, and you've heard, that you're the average of the 5 people that you hang around with the most, and that's true. You know everybody in your life, friends, family, people, work acquaintances. They all have an impact on you, whether you realize it or not. The same way you have an impact on them. The great thing is we can actually choose who those people are that surround us. But think about how powerful that is as a leader. The statements that you make to your organization about the people that you spend your time with is everything. Are you spending your time with the people at the bottom that you're trying to give them life support? Or are you actually spending them with your top people? That makes a big statement. Are you spending your time with the people that tend to waste your time? They just want to eat up time. Or are you spending your time with the future leaders of your organization? Are you surrounding yourself with people that tell you what you want to hear and give you a yes and nod their heads? Or are they these people that actually are going to tell you what you need to hear and are going to challenge you and may even create some conflict and discomfort? And are you going to surround yourself with people that are talkers or people that are actually doers? I separate people into 3 categories. There's talkers, the people that you meet them at a party, you meet them everywhere at an event like this, and you think they're the most successful person in the world. They love to talk about everything they've done. When you peel back the layers, there's actually not much there. And then there are thinkers that are brilliant. I mean, they're creative, they can think out of the box, they're super smart, but it doesn't go much past that. And then you have people that are doers. It doesn't even matter. They may not have the gift of gab or the silver tongue, but they just get out there and try stuff. They may try 10 things and 7 of them don't work, but they've got 3 that do. And And they try 10 more things, and 7 of them they fail and mess up, but they've got 3 more, now they got 6. They're just people that get out there. What type of people do you surround yourself? That's problem number 1. Problem number 2. But people that have super huge, high potential sometimes get bogged down by they think about their weaknesses too much. And they get overwhelmed with the weaknesses, the self-perceived weaknesses. I will tell you what, you can go through dozens of leaders, unbelievably impactful people in our world that had weaknesses, and in some cases, you would sit here and say, what? How do they overcome that? And some of them may just have been their own perceptions of themselves. We think about impactful leaders have this, this unbelievably, imperceptibly high level of confidence. Not always. You got people like Princess Diana, who actually suffered from severe self-esteem issues. She felt she was too tall. She was 5'10". She actually wanted to be a ballerina. They wouldn't let her because she was too tall. She felt like she was too tall to be in the limelight. She didn't want to be. And she suffered immensely from that. Yet she impacted millions of people in a positive way. You've got people also like Richard Branson. Richard Branson had severe dyslexia. His teachers said he was dumb and he was lazy. They didn't want him in their classes. And what's fascinating about Richard Branson is today he credits dyslexia as one of the things that made him such a successful leader, because it forced him to delegate more. Listen to that. It forced him to do something that great leaders have to do. He actually now takes notes, copious notes in every meeting he has. It's actually helped him in many, many situations. All these things that were perceived as a weakness were a strength. You've got people like Thomas Edison impact the way we live our lives today. Thomas Edison, whether you realize it or not, was fully deaf in his left ear, 80% deaf in his right ear. And he had difficulty talking and pronouncing things. There was actually a period of time where they were able to do a procedure to fix his hearing, at least to a degree. And you know what? He refused. And the reason he refused, he said he felt it was an advantage that he couldn't hear because it allowed him to focus more and channel his thoughts. Think about that. You've got people like Gandhi, revered as one of the most unbelievable leaders, effective leaders, and moving masses and millions of people in a positive direction. Yet, I don't know if you realize this, Gandhi actually started as an attorney. And he failed in his law practice. And the reason he failed is he couldn't speak in front of a group. He couldn't do a closing argument. He couldn't do cross-examine people. His hands would shake and he was petrified of it. And he failed. Yet many people would think that would hold somebody back from being an unbelievable leader. That certainly did not. Problem number 3, they're too concerned with what other people think. They're afraid to make bold decisions because of the backlash. And they listen to all the things that people think. Well, I'll tell you, that's not leadership. There's nobody who achieved greatness from that. And give you a great example with Henry Ford back in 1913. Okay, Ford was a company that actually struggled for a period of time because he came up with the assembly line concept, and actually productivity started to go through the roof, which was terrific. But what did it do to retention? Turnover in Ford went through the roof. Went to 370%. Just do the math on that. That's the average person at Ford staying there for about 3 months. You can't run a company that way. He was paranoid. He didn't know what to do. What he did is made 3 unbelievably bold decisions that transformed actually our workforce now. He dropped the hourly, the time for the day from 9 hours to 8 hours. He added a 3rd shift. And he did one other thing that was incredible, and people were begging him not to do it. He doubled the hourly wage. Doubled it. Well, guess what? What that actually did is it drove productivity through the roof. The price of the Model T dropped in half. Turnover went to 16%. And his CFOs and his advisors were telling him he's absolutely nuts. I didn't want to be associated with you. These decisions are so crazy. And he became known as one of the best automakers of all time and a billionaire today. You've got other companies. iTunes was hated by musicians and artists. They didn't understand. How is this going to help us? People were buying a whole record, a whole DVD, yet now we're going to sell a song at a time? iTunes was one of the most revolutionary software for Apple. LegalZoom, which is a company many of you may know, may not know. This is a company that started to bring together the complex law universe into very user-friendly means of doing the basic things you need to do. Today, it's a $2 billion company. You got companies like Netflix, which you've heard some of the speakers talk about. Unbelievable story. When this first came out, they were starting to charge people for the monthly subscriptions. People thought this was absolutely the craziest idea in the world. It was absolutely nuts. How are you going to do this? This is the demise of Netflix. Jim Cramer on Mad Money, if you know who he is, actually at $19 a share for Netflix, told everybody to sell. Guess what? Netflix today is selling for about $350 a share, market capitalization of $150 billion. Here's something that's interesting too. A couple of interesting quotes. In 1902, New York Times stated that the automobile was impractical. The Washington Post that year said the popularity of the wheel is doomed. As a fad, cycling is dead. Here's another interesting thing. In 1940, there was a rejection letter to Chester Carlson. And this is what the rejection letter says, is, who the hell wants to copy a document on plain paper? Well, Chester actually invented Xerox. Wow. Another quote from a Yale professor to Fred Smith on a paper that he proposed. He said, the concept is interesting, but to earn higher than a C, the idea has to be feasible. Okay, this was a paper that Fred Smith wrote on proposing reliable overnight delivery. Guess what company that was? FedEx. Pretty amazing. Problem 3, people are too concerned with other things. They also, problem number 4, they lack decisiveness. They lack the ability to make good decisions. Tons of great examples of this. Radio Shack. For those of you who don't remember Radio Shack. Radio Shack lost its identity. It didn't know what to do. Radio Shack was incredibly successful at one point. It didn't know what products to put on their shelves and display, and they started to go in strange directions. They actually didn't know how to brand themselves. They renamed themselves The Shack. Okay, that's actually probably not a good name for a company. They renamed themselves The Shack. And from an online perspective, they knew everybody was trying to talk about selling products online. They refused to do that. They said, no, we don't think our consumers are going to want to do that. They just want to locate our stores. And that's all they did on their website. Okay, that was the demise of them. Blockbuster, another great example. Believe it or not, Blockbuster had the ability to buy Netflix for $50 million. How about that investment? $50 million turning into $150 billion. Okay, yet they thought that their way of doing things was the future. Not the case. Series of bad decisions. On the other side, you've got great decisions. People that made tough decisions and bold decisions. Like Joseph Burke, the CEO of Johnson & Johnson, back in 1982, terrible situation where seven people died in Chicago in the U.S. from bottles that were laced with cyanide. You remember that? Horrible situation. Faced with this dilemma, Joseph Burke, at a cost of $100 million, had Johnson & Johnson take all the bottles immediately off the shelves across the world and come up with a tamper-proof bottle. When he was interviewed after, he said, it doesn't matter if it was 400 million or 4 billion, it doesn't matter. We had no choice. That was going to happen. And it was the right decision. Other great example of decisiveness, Jack Welch. Jack Welch is known as one of the most decisive persons. Believe it or not, and GE under his reign went from 10 billion market capitalization to 300 billion in 30 years. Think about that type of success. And one of the best ideas he had, sitting on a beach one day, came up with the idea number 1 or number 2, meaning we're number 1 or number 2 in a market, our business, or we're out. We're either going to sell or we're going to close down the business. They had hundreds of businesses that were 3, 4. So you have business owners and managers of these businesses that were running very successful, profitable organizations within GE that were 3rd in their marketplace, yet they were shut down. Talk about a tough decision. It proved to be one of the best decisions GE ever made. Jack Welch also came up with the concept of workouts. Workout is used today in many companies around the world. And basically the concept is, let's bring together rank and file employees and let's pick their brain. Let's have brainstorming sessions. Let's bring a senior leader in that meeting who has to make decisions on at least 80% of those ideas on the spot. Talk about that for decisiveness. Great, great idea. So let's talk on the other side. What do exceptional leaders do? What do they do to get that 3% edge? And you're going to learn today, for those of you who attend my session at 3:30, right here in this room, you're going to learn all the stuff that they do, because I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to give you a preview of it right now. I'm going to talk about what do they think, what goes on up here that makes them so good and better and gives them that 3% edge. What do they say? And most importantly, what do they do? So let me give you an idea of what this is. And today I'm going to fill in the question marks there, but let me give you some examples of what goes into this. First of all, great leaders manage their emotions extremely well. And I will tell you, this is a difference maker in life not just leadership, but in life. Okay, as an example, who has ever sent an email that you wish you had an unsend button? You wish you could get that thing back, huh? I think we all have at some point. We've written an emotional email, we've sent it, and that's, oh, geez. And the reason why is emotions they don't lead us to make good decisions. Whether we're in a positive emotional state, think about the bad decisions you have made in your life. Positive emotional state or negative emotional state, it oftentimes leads to bad decisions. Great leaders take the emotions out of it. I say great leaders are sometimes like fighter jet pilots, nothing phases them. They also focus on the things that they control. They don't focus on the things that they can't. You've got no control over them. Okay, I'll give you a great example. I came here, I flew in yesterday with my twin sister Julie. Flew in from the mainland, 20 hours, landed here in the morning all excited. Yet my luggage decided not to take the trip with me. So that's fun. So my bag is flying around somewhere in the world, not located yet. So I came here, I was in shorts and flip-flops and a t-shirt, and scrambled. I got to know the great country of Taiwan very well yesterday, having visited about 25 clothing stores, and about 5 o'clock at night came up with this. So when you're pretty good, huh? I'm 6'3", 230 pounds, and I've got size 14 shoes. It's not easy to walk into a store anywhere and get something off the rack. So I love Taiwan, thank you. And it made for a good story. See, there was a reason why it happened. I figured it out, and that's I could add it to my presentation. Kind of cool. Leaders recognize the importance of that. Let's talk about what do leaders say. Top leaders, to get that 3% edge, they actually are great at setting the pace of their organization. Here's what I will ask you. You have a pace in your organization right now. Whether you realize it or not, you do. And what is that pace? Is that pace geared toward the top level people or the lower level people? You control that. You set that pace. Again, you may not even be conscious of what it is. I'll give you a great example. For those of you who have been to Hawaii in the United States, raise your hand if you've ever been to Hawaii. There's a great excursion that actually takes you up a crater. It's 10,000 feet up. At the crack of dawn, you load up into a van, they take you up there, you watch the sunrise from 10,000-foot crater. It's absolutely breathtaking. And you have danishes and you have coffee and tea and all that. And then what they do is they give you a bike. And you bike down this crater. 30 miles. It's unbelievable. I remember leading up to this excursion, I was so excited. I'm thinking, this is going to be unbelievable. I'm literally going to go 60 miles an hour on the bike. I'm just literally going to just go. And it's funny because for 30 miles, you do not pedal once. I mean it. You literally do not pedal once. I've never felt like I've been so lazy after a 30-mile bike ride, but that's true. But here's the interesting thing. There's about 12 people in our group. They line us up, and before they give us our bikes, they say, okay, rate your comfort level on a bike on a scale of 1 to 10. And I said, 9, 10. I think most people said a 9 or a 10. There was one person who said a 2. And the reason was they'd only been on a bike maybe a couple of times in their life. So what do you think the tour guide did? Where do you think the tour guide put that person that was number 2? In the front. They were the first ones, and we all lined up and went down the excursion behind them. How do you think that was? So what I will tell you, it took an excursion that should have been thrilling. It should have been an unbelievable excursion, and it made it painful. It was the most painful thing I think I've ever had. And I would let them go as far as I could. I would create distance, and I would fly down, and then I'd brake, and I'd wait, and I'd let them go. I mean, it was painful. Because we were not allowed to go any faster than the weakest person. Think about that. And I will tell you, if another tour group went flying by going 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, what do you think I would have done? I would have jumped ship and I would have joined that tour group. Because that tour group was going at the pace I wanted to go. What that represents is your top advisors, your top leaders. If your organization is not being run at the speed at which they want, they're going to look for organizations that are running at the speed that they want, and they will jump ship. Okay, pay attention to that. What is the pace of your organization? You control that. Another thing great leaders do, the top leaders, to give that extra 3% edge, they're exceptional at making things simple. I don't say keeping things simple, but I say making things simple. Because this is a complex business. You've got all these moving parts, you've got all these variables to create success. But they're so good at making it simple. What's the one thing, what's the first domino that needs to fall to create the success? Complication is your enemy. And I'm always fascinated flying in the plane. Every so often you get the cockpit door that opens up and you get a view into the cockpit. You ever see something that looks like this? Is it pretty amazing? Like, I am fascinated by that. I want to go to the pilot and just be like, okay, tell me what this button up here does. And just quiz him or her and just see. And just make sure. I just want to know that they know what everything is. I'm blown away by this because I look in there, I'm like, there is no way. I honestly don't. I think I'm a pretty smart guy. I don't think I could figure all that stuff out. There's no way. I maybe remember a couple things. Well, it's interesting. For those of you who are pilots or know a pilot, my dad is a pilot, and I talked to him about this. And he said, well, you know what, honestly, the pilot can probably tell you everything on there. He or she's going to be able to tell you what each switch does and what, like, they have to do that by certification, by their license. But for 90% of the flight, they're focused on like 3 things. That whole panel of complexity, there's 3 things that really fly the plane. And that's what they're focused on. They know the other stuff, they see it in their peripheral vision, but they don't focus on it. They know the 1 or 2 levers that are going to really be most important. Great leaders make things simple. What I will tell you is that I am fascinated by leadership. I'm fascinated. I study it. I've always just had this crazy passion about it because it's amazing that a lot of times leadership can just come down to a single moment. I know for myself there are things that people said to me when I was a new advisor early in the business that stuck with me forever. They caused me to change paths or change behavior or think differently. They might have been at a conference like this where somebody said something that just got the wheels turning. What's great is if you're in a leader position, sometimes you don't even know the impact of what you do. You don't know what that one nugget is, that one thing that you say. The day that you give that advisor a pep talk, you don't know. That might have been the day that they were going to quit. You have no idea. One little conversation can change everything. And in some cases can change the world. There's a boy that went out. His dad had told him to paint the fence outside in his backyard. And the boy worked out there for like 2 hours painting the fence. And when he got done, he went to his dad, told him he was done. And his dad went out there to inspect. And he did a pretty good job. He got most of it done. But the father noticed that there was one little section in the back, kind of behind the shed, that wasn't painted. And he said, well, what about this part of the fence? And the son looked at him and said, well, nobody can see that. I mean, nobody's going to know it's not painted. And his father shook his head and said, no, we will know it's not painted. We'll be able to see it. Doesn't matter if anybody else can. We know. And his father went on to tell him that as a cabinet maker, what was so critical is that the piece of wood that was behind the cabinet against the wall, that nobody could see, was as high quality a piece of wood as the one on the outside that was visible to everybody. That's how much care he took in the work that he did. And his father went on to explain to him that nothing is more important than the quality. It doesn't matter what people can see and what they can't. When you build something and you're a craftsperson, every detail counts. Well, that conversation impacted that boy, and he held that for the rest of his life. Every single thing he did, he approached from an angle of quality. And it didn't matter what was on the outside as much, it did, but it mattered on the inside as much as what was on the outside. He took such an obsessive, maniacally obsessive attitude toward quality, and he carried that through the rest of his life. And that conversation today actually impacts each one of us. Because most of the people in this room and 700 million people across the globe can reach into your pocket and pull out an iPhone. Because that person is Steve Jobs. He was obsessive about every detail. The inside of this phone looks as good as the outside. And in some cases, he went through painstaking efforts to make that happen. He was obsessed with the 3% difference. And today that impacts each and one of us. So what I will tell you and leave you with is each one of us gets exposed to ideas and thoughts, sometimes leadership moments, and we have a choice what we do with that. We are sometimes in the fortunate position to be able to impact other people with the words and the attitudes and the actions that we take. But it's not up to those around us. To do those things requires one person, and one person only. And that's you. It's up to you. So I look forward to seeing you today at 3:30 right in this room, and I'd love to take this conversation further. I greatly appreciate all of your time. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sean.